The Black Cat Lounge is sponsored by Paranormal Oddities, the little store with the big heart, Niagara at the Western Block, one of the top rated haunted destinations in Western New York, Dragonfly Art and Soul, metaphysical goods and classes, Mystery Control, your go-to feed for science, magic, true crime, paranormal, and much, much more. Hey everybody, Tim Shaw here. Thank you for being on. Thank you for hanging out at the Black Cat Lounge tonight. We got a great show. Real quickly, I just want to go and thank everybody at who came to the Plymouth Spiritualist Church in Rochester, New York, to hear me prattle on like an old washerwoman. I was asked to speak, and it was a thrill because of the fact that the Spiritualist Church in Rochester is rated as one of the 1% of the mother churches, one of the earliest church organizations. And you know what was really a thrill for me? I got a chance to go and speak from a podium. Well, podium came from the old church, I believe it's the inner loop or the outer loop. They had condemned the church, and they bought up the property, and then they moved to this little place where they are now. But the podium is from the original church, and that podium saw luminaries like Frederick Douglass, Susan B. Anthony speak from that podium. So it was an amazing time for me, amazing experience. And I can't believe the amount of people that showed up. I was thrilled. Thank you guys for staying, treating me to lunch, and then staying for a class afterwards that I taught. So it was really great. Now, so thank you guys. Thank you. I just want to go and bring on our guest, because our guest tonight is someone who I respect personally. I respect him. He's unbelievable. He's just a great person. One of these days I'm going to actually sit down with him again, and I'm actually going to go face to face. And I got 1,001 questions that I want to go and ask him. You know what? He returns tonight not only to talk about his ancestors' writings, but there's a great new project coming up. And I am excited about it. Our guest is an internationally acclaimed presenter. He's an author. He is the co-author of Dracula, the Undead, which is the official Stoker family endorsed sequel to Dracula. Dacre is also the co-editor with Elizabeth Miller of The Lost Journal of Bram Stoker, The Dublin Years. His latest novel, Dracula, a prequel to Dracula, was released in 2018, co-authored by J.D. Baker. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I do have a photograph of that we can share with everybody right here. These are the books. You can get these on Amazon, I know. And I will tell you what, I own 2 of the 3. And I cannot say enough about them. They're that good. So please, for me to say that I admire a person is a lot. I get a chance to rub elbows with a lot of celebrities. I get a chance to go and work with different people and TV people. But to have this gentleman take time out of his busy schedule to come on my show is just amazing. And I will say that it's just amazing. So please, everyone, welcome Dacre Stoker to the Black Cat Lounge. Once again, a repeat performance. Dacre, thank you for being here.
Hey, the big cat himself. Hey, Tim, how are you, buddy? Good to see you.
We are doing great. Dacre, it's so funny because I have 1,001 questions to ask you, and then yet I don't even know where to begin. So, what I want to do is I'm just going to go and I'm going to throw out just a general question at you. the legacy of Bram Stoker, has it weighed heavy on your shoulders, or has it been like a gift, or has it been just a huge adventure?
A little of everything, honestly. I know I get a rap occasionally. Oh, the guy's blessed. He's come into this world in the family with a really famous guy, and that's true. I didn't even know that until about the age of 12 or 13. But my family grew up in Montreal, Canada, and pretty serious, hardworking dad. He was a investment banker, and it was like, you got to make your own name, whatever you do. It doesn't matter where you came from.
Truth.
He had two other brothers. They all successful in what they did, and there was no resting on any laurels. And I was an athlete. I was a modern pentathlete for Canada, then a coach. You can't get a free ride in any of that stuff. It's the stopwatch. That's what all matters.
Truth.
And when I got into the writing, even while I was a school teacher, it was very much the same. You might, and I can say I did get an advantage by publisher and agent may drop the name Stoker. That gets me in the door. But with that, Tim, comes higher expectations. I know it.
Mm-hmm.
Bram Stoker and Dracula and other things that he wrote, and manager of Henry Irving and all the other stuff he did. You've got to be really first rate to hold a candle to that fellow. And if you do come in at second rate, reviewers, fans, they're going to jump all over you. So when I did the first book with Ian Holt, that's exactly what the editor said. Look, you guys got a foot in the door because of the name, but by golly, this is a good book, but we got some editing to do. It's like, I don't care who you are. We got some editing to do.
Mm-hmm.
You're to this person. And so anywhere I've gone, and I do respect folks like yourself who have great sense of reference for my great granduncle, but I also feel a responsibility to hold up my end and not just repeat what has been said by other biographers, to find original things myself, find things from the family, make friends and become valuable in the world of Dracula scholarship and fandom. So I've managed to sort of move out into those worlds, and over the past 15 years become accepted because I'm a producer. I'm not just a taker. I have found the lost journal of Bram Stoker in.
Oh yeah.
I have found things. I have put things together that other people might have discovered, but because I am the sort of the common denominator within the Stoker family, they sort of allowed me or asked me to be the guy that is that clearinghouse. I've been able to make some pretty interesting discoveries based on combining the info that other researchers have found, and I can put it together. We can talk about some of those a little bit later, because those are going to go into the documentary, and they do go into my books that I write.
I can't wait for this to come out. I really can't. This is something that has been sorely overdue. Sorely overdue. Now, next silly question that I have. Silly question. I want to get a couple silly questions out of the way. The vampire community. Now, where I live, there is a smaller vampire community, but I know after visiting New Orleans and running into different people that run in and out of the community, how have you been accepted with it?
Well, again, I tread lightly. I become aware of who the people are that have got trust within that community. And I have to say, a guy who's become a good friend of mine, who is not in the vampire community, but he is a guy that has got their trust and has written about them and has represented them. And he actually did his I think he did his doctoral thesis in Buffalo, John Edgar Browning.
Oh my God. I interviewed him years ago.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. Just phenomenal.
Great guy. And he's done a lot of Bram Stoker stuff. I have written some forwards to his stuff. We have collaborated. He's down the road from me in Atlanta at South Carolina College of Art and Design.
Right.
So he introduced me. I'll never forget. I went to New Orleans for a signing and a big part of the launch of Dracula the Undead. Ian got sick. He couldn't come. My wife came, and we were invited to the Anne Rice Vampire Lestat Ball. And John kind of took us under his wing and said, Dacre, I want to introduce you to some people who don't like to be publicized too much. They're very normal folks. They do have an interest in sharing blood voluntarily with each other.
Exactly.
and I said, well, John, I'd like to meet some of them. So I met him, and he said, look, the only thing is, we don't want to sensationalize it. They don't like to go on TV because people jump to conclusions. But I've become very good friends with some of these folks, and I see them, and I've been down there probably 15 times since then, and go and say hi and hang out at some of the shops where they work and see them. So doing things tastefully like that, and John does it as well. When he's got, he's tried to have documentaries done where some of these folks, tastefully, like maybe their faces blurred out just to explain what they're doing. So it's an interesting community. And I have great respect for all kinds of, people in the communities that have different tastes and different interests. So it's all cool for me. And I think I can say honestly that I've been accepted because I don't try to make a big deal out of it.
That's the one thing that I feel that I have learned over the years is that, and I mean, I've met people like, the late Raymond Buckland, I knew him for years. He developed the Wiccan societies, the Wiccan traditions. I'm people of his nature, his core, but they were just people. And some people can handle the celebrity, and some people would rather stay behind the curtain. And if you do that, if you respect that, it's amazing how the doors open up for you. And I think that's what, I think that's what you and I definitely have in common. We're able to go and we're able to traverse that labyrinth and get to the other side and be able to go and along the way collect some great, great friends.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because imagine what it was like in about 2008 when it's not like the Dracula movement or the interest in Bram Stoker started then. It'd been going for years with people like Elizabeth Miller, Sir Christopher Frayling.
Oh God, yes.
Robert Hosang. All these folks all over the world. And in walks this guy, sort of 50-year-old guy from now living in South Carolina, who's just written a book and claims that he has taken parts of Bram's notes and done all the studying. It's like, well, who is this guy? Is he trying to capitalize on the name? He's sort of joining our club. And,
right.
And it was, I knew that this was going to come. So I sort of eased into these things. I went a year before the book came out to a lot of these conferences and said to people, look, I've got a book coming out. I'm interested to know would you like to read a galley copy? I'd love to hear your interest in it. So again, it's the style, Tim, that you and I have to kind of ease in, maybe the side door, not barge in the front door, so we can walk out the front door proudly, not have to sneak out the back door.
That's a great analogy, because of the fact that how prejudiced so much of our society is, especially kind of now. We're living in a not so much a PC world, but sometimes an oppressive world where one side is really 100% against the other side. And I understand wholeheartedly how people must keep that balance, be able to go so you can actually function in this world. And a lot of people don't realize that. A lot of people just barge out there, and throw themselves out there or make that spectacle of themselves. I don't want to use the initials of a popular TV show that's that paparazzis are always running around, but that's the last thing that we need to do. And people, especially within the traditions, within the subcultures, need that anonymity. They need to keep that their own private lives private.
That's right. That's what they deserve. A little bit of peace and quiet. And as you say, the world would be a better place if we could get back to being a little more open-minded. And just because we may have differences in our beliefs, religious beliefs, sexual beliefs, political beliefs, if we could just leave those beliefs in one place and learn, look, we're all human beings, got the same color blood. We've got the same, most have the same interest in life, to have a good life and raise good families and have fun and make money and have nice holidays, and all that good stuff.
Yes, exactly. Now, Dacre, I got to ask you, now we talked about it last time you were on the show, and it still fascinates me. talk about that lost manuscript that you unearthed. And that's the only way I can describe it. You unearthed an unbelievable treasure. That is one of those things that's a literary treasure that people dream about unearthing. Tell everybody about it first, and then tell everybody how you found it. Oh my gosh, this is incredible.
Yeah, well, the Bram Stoker's journal is something that we know he had at least one copy or one journal, but the one that I found was only one that he kept between 1871 and 1883. So this was while he was a university student in Dublin. He was beginning to have interest in writing. You could see there was a lot of conflict in his life because his father did not want him to go into writing. He wanted him to do his master's in mathematics and be basically a bean counter as a clerk in the petty session legal department. So you can see oppression in this young man. But if you know things about him that I learned, it makes sense. He just, 10 years earlier, he was an invalid for 7 years. He has a family of scientists. 3 of his brothers, my great-grandfather being one of them, were very serious about their medical training. So in that household, you got 3 guys very focused on science, 2 sisters very focused on arts, 1 brother going through the whole rigmarole for civil service as well. And then there's Bram, who is interested in the theater, in the arts, and also in writing and expressing himself in a literary way. But he's squished into being a clerk at the Petty Sessions Legal Department while he's still a student at Trinity College. And somehow that's the only journal that's ever been found. And I found it on the Isle of Wight in his great-grandson's, one of his 2 who are living still, great-grandson's home, while I was doing my research for Dracula the Undead. They invited me to come over, my cousins, to look through the stuff they had. The strange thing, Tim, was the handwriting was so bad. They really did not know what it was. They knew it was Bram's writing. There's no dates. It wasn't like your typical journal you see nowadays, nicely bound. The pages were all falling out. Some of them were, around the box, different colored papers. It was a hodgepodge of stuff. But what it showed me when I finally got it was, oh my God, I'm going to need some help deciphering this. So the first person I went to was Dr. Elizabeth Miller, who's no longer living, but she was one of the great Dracula scholars. She was one of 2 people who had just spent a year deciphering Bram Stoker's other gem that was discovered earlier in 1965, I believe, in the Rosenbach Museum in Philadelphia. And that was his 125 pages of handwritten notes for Dracula. So she could decipher his handwriting.
Wow.
So she was at University of Toronto at the time. I sent images of all the pages up to her. And over the next year, the 2 of us independently, she'd take, a certain chapter, I'd take another one. We would look with our microscopes, with our magnifying glasses. We'd look at compared to other things, other letters that we had that we knew Bram wrote that we could read. And we finally deciphered the whole thing.
Amazing.
And it gave, in a nutshell, Tim, what it did was it gave me an idea, a really good idea of how my great-granduncle was wired, what he thought about at this stage in his life, what was interesting to him. And there was no, amazing things there that came out in Dracula, but there was some very macabre kind of things that caught his eye. There were some social issues that caught his eye. And I know there was sort of a thing that sort of caught his eye that was very Renfield-esque. There once was a little boy who kept so many flies in a jar that they had no room but to die.
Wow. Wow.
Now, that's a guy that looks at something weird like this, and years later, guess what? A character in his most famous novel pops out with this weird habit of eating little flies and bugs to take in the life.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Now, I have to ask you, when we start looking into his life, when we start looking into Bram as a person, a lot of people often think of him as flowery or I shouldn't say flowery. That's the wrong description. Someone who may have been the opposite, the total opposite of flamboyant. Someone who had the paper collar and was all, the ideal of a Victorian man, a man's man. Yet he was so interested in the theater. What was it, do you think, that really got him interested in the theater? And the reason I'm asking you this, Dacre, is that it's amazing because I think about this and how he's exposed to all these different plays and these different ideas and these classics. And then he kind of morphs into this morality story. And that's what Dracula really is. When you tear it apart, it's really like a morality story. So what do you think that was? What why do you think that he was so enamored with the theater?
Well, let me start with this. I mean, this is for your listeners and for you as well. Nowadays, obviously, we've got theater and television that sort of replace people going to the theater. But in those days, the theater was the only sort of visual form of entertainment. Why would people go? What do you do for that hour and a half? You escape, right? There's a sense of escapism. There's a sense of relief from all the problems of the normal world, and your imagination kicks in, be it a musical, be it a comedy, drama, horror, whatever. It's escape, and it gets into your head, and you get to just imagine stuff. So that's part of my answer. The other part is what I know about Bram. 7 years, invalid, in his bedroom, most of the time, building a very dark sense of imagination, being told stories all about cautionary tales in Ireland. And I won't go into all the detail, but they're all about fairies, goblins, pukas, banshees.
Yes, they are.
Scary shit like vampires, okay?
Yes.
So all of that is going on. Very descriptive stuff that, gets into you. And then he was also a visual guy. He actually, as a kid, won some awards for drawing. He was actually a founding member of the Dublin Painting and Sketching Club. Wow. But then on the outside was, and I think half his brain was that creative side, expressionism side. It was being subdued because the other side was the masters in mathematics, the bean counter, the guy that is working as a clerk in the Petty Sessions Legal Department, writes a whole manual for all the clerks to follow once he becomes the inspector of all clerks and finds out that none of them are dispensing the law properly. So he is very detail oriented. That's the guy that takes care of the train schedules in Dracula. That's all of the legality. So there's two sides of this brain, Tim, in a very unique individual, because nowadays when you study brain development and people's interest, it's usually one much more dominant than the other. But Bram, even though he may look like a very stiff upper lip, paper collar type Victorian guy, he was that when he needed to be the manager of the Lyceum Theatre. But in his free time, when he could kind of morph out of that and delve into his very interesting sort of Iric Celtic mysticism side, the side that we can get into in a few moments about spiritualism and mesmerism, all these other interesting things that are floating around the world that he's living in, that he's allowed to think about, but maybe not do too much about because of his conservative standing as the theater manager. His expression comes out in this writing. And it's not just writing Dracula. It's the Jewel of Seven Stars. It's the Snake's Pass. It's other sort of stories that have mystical things and elements to them. That's what really makes up Bram Stoker. And it's been a pleasure getting to know him and being able to, look at what other people have written about it and say, yeah, that part's good, but no, you didn't take this into account, or you should have known more about that. You should have dug deeper here, or have you read his journal that I found? You're going to see more about him than meets the eye.
Right. Was there anything that, I'm going to call your research and your writing and the publishing your books a journey, a total journey, because I sit here and I've published a few books, nothing that compares to what you've gone through, what you've experienced, the wonderment that you found. Has there anything really surprised you about Bram Stoker, his personality, quirks, whatever? Do you think that maybe what I'm looking for is just like you sitting there going, like tilting your head a little bit and saying, wow, that's kind of unique.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to give you a quote that when I get asked a question like that, because everybody wants to know, Dacre, pull back the curtain, Wizard of Oz style. Pull back
Right,
the curtain.
right.
Tell us something we don't know. I know this book. I know how it's been interpreted. I know Dracula, Lugosi, Lee, Langella. I want to know the creator. So here's a quote from the novel that I really believe will get us going into some interesting areas. And it is where Van Helsing explains to the scientist in the book, Dr. Seward, the doctor.
Right.
And it's trying to make a sense of what may be out there in the supernatural world, in the whole world of spiritualism and so on. And that is obviously the presence of a vampire. And he says, there are mysteries which men can only guess at, which age by age they may solve only in part. That sums up Bram Stoker, I believe, Tim, and his beliefs. And here is my backup for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he was a religious man. He was a Protestant in a very Catholic country. He was a churchgoer, but he also was a Freemason. We believe that he may have attended a couple of meetings of the Golden Dawn.
I forgot about that.
Yep. So he was interested in what's out there.
Right.
He was very interested in Charles Darwin's work. As a matter of fact, Darwin published Origin of the Species in 1859. There was an article from the New York World newspaper in his notes for Dracula where Darwin is mentioned discovering the vampire bat.
Wow.
And he actually lifts some lines of what Darwin says and sticks it in Quincy Morris's mouth when he says, oh, yes, these vampire bats, when I was in South America doing our exploration, we found these big bats came out of the trees at night and drank so much blood from my horse, I had to put it down. Well, Darwin said they would come out of the trees and drink blood from the cattle. So Bram was interested in the natural world and the supernatural world as well, as he was friends with people like Arthur Conan Doyle, Mark Twain, and the Wilde family, Oscar Wilde and Mrs. Wilde, all very interested in sort of the mystical side of the world. So that was something that really got my attention of saying, Bram is not just that stuffy kind of guy. He has some great interest in the paranormal, as we would call it nowadays. Back in those days, there was Second Sight, which he actually wrote a chapter in one of his other famous books, Mystery of the Sea, all about.
Yes, I've read. Yes.
So all of that is kind of bundled up into this great Celtic mysticism side of Bram that you got to know where to look to find it. And I think that's where we're going to go shortly because I love talking about it.
Well, this is what, so earlier in the show, in my introduction, I thanked the congregation of Plymouth Church in Rochester, New York, which is one of the very first mother church organizations in the spiritualist community, early or late 1800s when it was formed. And during our lunch, after I spoke and before a class I taught, a person, one of the congregants came up to me and we started talking, and he says, well, you're going to have Dacre Stoker on, right? And I said, yeah. He goes, ask him about Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and Bram's friendship. But Bram seems to be like a matter-of-fact guy, like a scientific guy. He believed in science over superstition. But Arthur Conan Doyle was sort of the opposite.
Yeah.
And we know at this time, this is what we considered the golden age of spiritualism. It was sweeping the world, actually, at that time. What do you think Bram Stoker's opinion of spiritualism was? Because again, I'm all this is going through my mind as he's asking me this question, and it's like, my God, we're talking about the Victorian time period. We're talking about explorations. We're talking about innovations. We're talking about science and how science is trying to prove spiritualism. And even in our principles, I belong to the National Spiritual Association of Churches. In our principles, they even mention that it is a science. Spiritualism is a science proven through mediumship. So what do you think his opinion would be? I've been on pins and needles waiting to ask you
Sure,
this,
sure.
Doctor. I mean, I can't wait.
Well, let me throw one little thing back to you. You said when you were introducing this question that Bram was a man of science, or was he a man of spiritualism? I don't believe he was a man of science. I believe he was
Really?
influenced heavily by science. And I believe that part of him was very interested in recognizing the contributions of science, his three brothers, obviously.
Right.
But he
Right.
was also somebody who created Arthur Van Helsing, excuse me, um, Abraham Van Helsing.
Yes.
So by creating Abraham Van Helsing, what did he really represent? He represented a man from the old world who was a philosopher,
Right.
a lawyer, a doctor. So he was a scientist who recognized that spiritualist, mythical side of things. This was, I think, the guy that was trying to, well, we know darn well he was trying to influence the band of heroes, the lawyer, the lord, the doctor, the ladies, Mina, the modern woman, to understand, hey guys, the evidence might be right in front of you. We've been giving Lucy blood transfusions for 2 days. Every night she's full of blood. She's doing great. The next day we come and check on her. What happened? She's out of blood. Her skin is pale. She's almost dying, and there's no pool of blood lying on the ground. How can you scientifically prove that? And they couldn't, and it drove those guys crazy. And that's when Van Helsing had to say, there are more things, in life. And he used the Hamlet piece too in his introduction. So there are more things than heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy. So it's like, guys, even though right now in our history, we are making great scientific advances by using the scientific method of proving things, there's more to life than that. And here's where, Tim, we get into, there's much more to life than things we can prove right now. This concept of tarot cards, of spirit rapping, of seance, of all kinds of things that might just have some merit. And I think Bram was trying to tell people he himself is an open-minded person, like Van Helsing was trying to explain to these guys. And I'm going to tell you why in just a sec, because I have a little proof, and I'm not sure if I told it in your last show, why I think Bram leans that way. And the reason is, I found in the Dundee, Scotland newspaper that Bram spent at least 12 summers in Cruden Bay, Scotland, north of Aberdeen, where he wrote many of his books, Dracula being one of them. The Scottish have all kinds of interesting stories and beliefs. They've produced, Conan Doyle and others who have developed these. Edinburgh has all kinds of interesting medical advances, psychic research, and so on going on. Bram actually wrote in his notes that he was planning to have a psychic research agent in the novel, but he didn't use them after all. It was a
really? Oh no,
yes.
you never. Oh my gosh, you never told me that.
Well, Tim, I can't tell you everything in one podcast.
I know.
Bits and pieces will come out.
That's
so
amazing.
I'm using him in other stories, this Alfred Singleton guy. But getting back to Dundee newspaper, so there was a guy called Norval Scrimgeour, who was a writer who in 1931 wrote an article. He said, way back in 1910, I believe, no, 1900, something like 30 years ago, I attended a gathering in a private home when Henry Irving was putting on a play in Edinburgh. Bram and Irving were invited to this house for reception afterwards. I found Bram Stoker much more interesting. We sat by the fire, and he had a group of people around him. He had a cigar and his glass of sherry, and we talked all about second sight. And he went into great detail, Scrimgeour did, about 2 situations where Bram Stoker observed an incident of second sight. And here is the first one.
Wow.
Is that he was in a home visiting some people friends of his wife's in Edinburgh. The mother was holding an infant, a 2-year-old, and they had a 5-year-old. And the 5-year-old came into the room. Bram and Florence were there, the lady holding the baby, and the kid, the 5-year-old was crying. Ah, what's the matter? And I don't know what the baby's name was. I don't remember, but baby Willie won't play. He's dying. No, he's fine. He's just fine. He's no, the way kids are, they make up stuff. No, he's dying. He will never play with me again. And no, he's fine. The kid's just fine. Bram went home. Next morning, he found out that the baby died that night.
Wow.
That possibly that kid was, knew something the mom and dad didn't know, and that child died. The second one was even stranger, and it took place over a longer time. The Earl of Errol, who Bram got to know, he owned all the land around Cruden Bay, Scotland. He owned Slains Castle, and Bram visited Slains Castle and was invited on a pheasant shooting outing. And the loader, much like a fishing guide, you'll have a guide that goes with you and hands you your shotgun and loads it for you, boom.
Yeah.
And Bram's loader was from the Highlands of Scotland, real mountain kind of guy, mystical kind of guy. And he goes, well, how is, Bram said, how is the Earl? He says, oh, not well. The sheet is high. And what that means is the sheet that you pull over the body when it's high, which is their expression of he's close to death.
Right.
And Bram thought, he's out. We've been walking for 10 miles. He's not huffing. He's not puffing. There's nothing wrong. He goes, oh, yes. So the shoot is over. They go back. Bram has his holiday. He doesn't hear anything wrong about the Earl. He comes back the next year for his summer holiday, as he did for 12 years, invited on another pheasant hunt, and he requested the same loader. And Bram went to him and said, you see, you were wrong, laddie. You were wrong. He goes, oh, no, the sheet is much higher now. He goes, really? Is there something I need to know? Just trust me. A week later, the Earl died of a brain aneurysm. No cancer, nothing progressive.
Right.
Just like that. So here are two situations that a writer who is also a believer and was looking for situations found this in Bram Stoker, and Bram was not pulling anyone's leg. And to finish this off, the one book that I found in Bram's personal library, and John Browning actually discovered the book report of this Bram did not a book report, a review, a review of this book. It was about Second Sight in the Highlands of Scotland. Browning found a review of it in a New Zealand newspaper. It's the only book Bram ever reviewed. And Browning sent me the review. Wow. And it wasn't like, oh, this is a whole lot of gobbledygook. This was most of this stuff is real. Sometimes it's taken out of, blown out of proportion. But what I'm getting at, Tim, long-winded, I'm sorry, but it's, I've now heard these situations where Bram has extolled the virtues that this stuff really happens and formally written a book review saying that this is the real deal, that it's not a lot of hullabaloo.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Dacre, I have to have you on once every couple months just to get these little tidbits, because I am floored right now. I did not know anything about that, because I was always under the impression that he was more of a
straight arrow, right?
Yeah. I mean, everything that I've kind of read about him, I knew he had a little bit of a mystical leaning, but nothing to this extent.
Yeah. Well, it makes me feel good, because a guy like you, who was very serious about this endeavor, now you've got a more realistic idea of Bram Stoker because of my research, and that makes me feel great. And I will tell you this, because somebody popped up earlier and said, ooh, a new book. I am writing a book with Dr. Leverett Butts, and it is like the other two, I find good co-authors. It is about the summer Bram Stoker was writing Dracula in Cruden Bay,
Ooh,
And he has this, it's fictional, but you know what I do with fiction.
right.
He has many incidences where he understands his second sight. He comes to grips with it and he connects with somebody in the town and he realizes, this is not a spoiler, that his son may have inherited this ability and he's got to sort of work with his son to sort of harness it, so to speak. Okay. So when I
Phenomenal.
find things like this, Tim, it's like,
Phenomenal.
what do you do with it that's interesting? You write a fictional story that, just like you're going through now, it makes you wonder, oh my God, I wonder if that's true. Or could he have really done that? Or how could that help him? How does it hurt him? How do people think about him if he is this way?
By knowing this backstory, I cannot wait for this book to come out because it's going to be right up my alley, something that I love to read. Now, I don't get a chance to read a whole lot of fiction, unfortunately. I think the last book I read that had some fiction, it was one of your books. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to lie.
I'm honored. I'm honored.
But I mean, because I'm always, most of what I'm doing is research. So I'm always out there looking. This really has gone and opened my eyes to an entire different Bram Stoker. And your upcoming book is going to be icing on the cake because to me, it's going to really kind of tie so much of what you told me before, and it's going to tie all of this together for me. That's going to be amazing. Oh my God, we're running out of time already. So I got one more. I got one more little thing that I have to ask you, and then we're going to launch into your project.
Sure.
Just quickly, Vlad Tepes, Dracula, or based on somebody else? And the first rule of being an interviewer is know the answer before you ask the question. I read your notes that you sent me, and I sat there and went, yeah, I remember reading that someplace.
Sure. So, okay, listeners, you've all heard of Vlad the Impaler, Vlad Dracula III, Prince Vlad Dracula of Wallachia. Well, Bram Stoker actually did his incredible research and found two books in the London Library that was all about Vlad Dracula, the name Dracula meaning devil, right? So that is part of Count Dracula from Transylvania. Wallachia and Transylvania is right next to each other. So that is a close connection. What Bram also needed was a visual representation of this devil incarnate. And he got that from Henry Irving playing Mephistopheles in the play Faust for 20 years. So then Bram has visual devil. He's got to name the devil. But if you read chapter 2, I hope you read the whole book, listeners, but you'll understand there's a heck of a backstory that Bram needed to attach to his supernatural count. And there it was in a book by William Wilkinson, another by James Samuelson in London Library, all the backstory you needed of Vlad the Impaler and his fights against the Ottomans. There's also, he took a little bit of Michael the Brave, who was another historical character of the same period of Vlad. So he is a master of merging things. And just imagine, guys, this is what people of the theater would do.
Right.
You take interesting attributes to make a really cool character. Irving did this all the time, and Bram Stoker did it with his other stories. And this is the one that's most popular because it's, Vlad was now a very famous guy. And he's made more popular because of Bram. So this is a merger of characters. That's what we get today.
Amazing. That's amazing. That's just amazing. I have to, you know what? I got to thank you for already. It's not the end of the show, but I have to thank you for this knowledge because this has been a thrill because I think of nothing better than to research and prepare for an interview. I really do. I love it. It's in my blood. It's just something that I've always liked to do. This is a labor of true love, being able to go and prepare to talk to you. Let's talk about the upcoming project.
Sure. So this is a documentary that I've provided a lot of research to John West, who's a friend of mine who does a lot of British paranormal writing and exploration, and Jason Figgis, who is an Irishman filmmaker. Both of them have a long pedigree. I met them years ago on my earlier trips to Dublin. We've always talked about doing this, And we always felt, oh yeah, we're going to have so much cool information that the studios are going to be banging on the door to come and buy this from us. So what we ended up doing is like, well, no, we pitched it to a couple places and kept going, well, that's been interesting, but everybody really wants to know about Dracula. And I keep saying, yeah, but the creator of Dracula has been overshadowed by his creation. Don't you want to know who created him? And yeah, that's pretty cool. But so we said, the heck with it. We're just going to do it ourselves. So over the last 5 years, Tim, all the trips that I've taken to research, to go and give lectures on Stoker, to lead tours to Transylvania, Cruden Bay, Whitby, Ireland. A couple of good friends have come along with me. One of them is Colin Hamilton, who's an Irish guy living in Romania now, who's used to be a Sky TV videographer. He's now freelance. He's got the bug like I have. He wants to find answers. He comes along with his drone, with his cameras. He takes great footage. We do little interviews. So we're basically doing this seat of the pants, but we've collected some really good footage. Anytime there's an interesting conference going on in Dublin, the Bram Stoker Festival every Halloween goes on. There's lots of really good speakers. Jason Figgis goes and gets an interview. I've interviewed some of these guys. So we've got all this footage. John West put together the script. I did the narration upstairs up in my house here in a very quiet room. What we need now is about 25,000 grand to rent space at very high-end editing studios. So Jason can go in there and rent this place and get all the bells and whistles so that he can stitch all this stuff together with effects to make, to put our story together. I really think the story is a good one. And it's going to be probably a 75-minute to 90-minute type of documentary that would work great at film festivals, maybe get picked up by a History Channel or something. My ultimate goal is to have like a mini series, like a 3 or 4 part mini series. But if this thing goes well, maybe that spurns other things, because there's so many cool adventures I've been on in Transylvania, the castles, places in Ireland where I think Bram was inspired. But for now, this is great. It's on Indiegogo. It actually started in early April, and so people can donate money and they get lots of rewards. Bottom line is we're going to make this thing hell or high water, even if we got to fork out more money in our pockets. But anything from other people would be very helpful. So that's my plea. I'm going to give you a freebie, though, while you're listening, because everyone loves something free. BramStoker.org is a free website. And what Tim and I were talking about 8 minutes ago was the story Bram wrote, The Mystery of the Sea. And the early chapters of Mystery was published as The Seer. All of Bram's books, including The Seer, can be accessed free. Don't even have to give your email address. No hooks about it. You can read that story and understand what the two of us are talking about Bram Stoker's personal experiences and how he wove that into a story in Cruden Bay, Scotland. And all that type of cool background stuff is included in this documentary as well. Indiegogo, the father of Dracula, John West, Jason Figgis, Dacre Stoker. Hope you guys, feel like you want a little bit of the love, share the love, toss a couple of dollars in and be helpful.
I have been a part of several indie productions, low budget streaming, and I can tell you that these are the projects that always have had the most heart. These are the projects that have always been so good, so informative, because basically no one's out there to make the big bucks. If it comes, it comes. But it's more important to get the information out there, to be able to go and share it with everyone. And it's funny because you and I, different walks of life, same philosophies. And the big thing that I have always admired about you was the fact that you were never rude to anybody. You always took time to talk to everybody. You always went and were friendly with everybody. but you gave more than you took in. And that's a mark of a true, that's a mark of a genius. That's a mark of someone who is really has honed their craft and is someone to be trusted and is so believable. And I have to say, Dacre, that it is, and I mean, I'm not going to lie. I mean, I don't blow smoke up anybody's butt. I'm going to come right and tell you. I mean, it's an honor to know you. It's been an honor to have met you, back and forth a couple times way up in North Michigan, where we, where it's like August and it's still snowing up there, and it's really something that I feel is so important. This project is so important because this takes a huge piece of America. I'll just say Americana because it was an American movie, basically. Dracula, the very first black and white original.
1931, Bela Lugosi and Todd
Exactly.
Browning directed.
It was absolutely a classic here. And when you think about it, now you are adding more to the mythology. Because here in the United States, we have a habit of like tearing down our mythology and getting rid of it. You are preserving that mythology. You are giving even more to it. I cannot wait to see this come to fruition.
Are you going to be at Paracon this year?
Up in Michigan?
Yeah.
Yes.
Me too. I'm going back. Brad's got me. So
awesome.
So we can talk more. And hopefully by then we'll have an answer if this thing is up and going.
Oh, that's going to be great. That'll be great.
I look forward to sharing more stories and telling you more in person. So yeah, that's very cool. And look, I really do appreciate the kind words that you've put in my direction. I try to, hold up the honor of the family, do things right.
You do.
And the more I can, produce for people to get a better understanding, people like yourself and your listeners and other people who are interested in Dracula want to know, where little bits and pieces came from. I will tell you this, folks, don't get tricked into just watching any old Dracula movie and figure the book. It is not an easy book to read, but take your time.
Yes.
Go back to it. I have met more people, Tim, when I travel the world doing this, that have read this book, like every second or third year, they pick it up again. They get something else out of it. Oh my God, I can't believe this. Oh, this is where he got this idea from. There's a lot of little kernels, gold nuggets that are in this book that just sort of keep coming out and so on.
People don't realize the Victorian era, the writing is really to modernize is tough. It can be tough, but if you have it, and it was created to be visual. It was created for you to take your time, savor the words, visualize the scene,
yes,
and go on to the next paragraph or the next chapter. That's the way the Victorian era was created. This literature was created. As you can tell behind me, I do have a little interest in the Victorian era, but it's truly amazing that this has happened. Stay on the line. Oh, go ahead.
Hold on one second.
We have a couple minutes.
Well, one thing I went over something that I didn't touch on, and you asked me to because
we have time.
Arthur Conan Doyle. First of all, what was their relationship? First of all,
yes.
Bram and Conan Doyle were good friends. Bram attended Conan Doyle's wedding. He and Florence did, so that shows they were close. He actually wrote a very interesting article in a British newspaper, not tabloid, but a nice newspaper, talking about his beliefs and his interests. He actually helped even Conan Doyle produce one of his short stories as a play at the Lyceum Theatre. So there was a connection there as well.
I didn't know that.
Professionally. And then there, listeners, you can Google Bram Stoker, Arthur Conan Doyle letter. There's a Conan Doyle estate that keeps letters and makes them public. Conan Doyle wrote a very nice letter to Bram Stoker congratulating him on Dracula. And one of the cool lines in it, he said was, I love the old professor, very interesting character. And it was the best story of diablerie I've read for an awful long, that I've read in a long time. Now, that's that whole occult devil type, dark side. So there's that little, we like to read things into these types of words that nowadays might not mean as much as
Right.
coming off of Arthur Conan Doyle's pen. Diablerie means, hey, buddy, you hit the mark just right in my world. So that
Amazing.
was cool. So yeah, there was that connection. There was a friendship. To be invited to a guy's wedding means they are pretty tight. So I just want to make sure we cemented that before we signed off tonight.
And I will say that we don't have to go into it, but a friend of mine is I won't say he's an impersonator. He portrays Mark Twain.
Oh, nice.
And I got a chance to talk to him. He's really good at what he does. Been doing it for over 35 years. And I brought up what we talked about last time about
faith. that line, that faith is believing what you know ain't so, and how that got into Dracula. Yeah.
What I absolutely loved was Mike turned around and he quoted that to me. I went, "You got to be kidding me!" I thought I was going to be able to go and one up him. I thought I was going to be able to go and just say, "Hey, Mike, this is what I learned." He knew it. He knew
it.
That's
so cool. Yeah. Look, how about when we get to Michigan? I've got some very other cool stories about Mark Twain and speeches that Mark Twain gave in New York, where he credited Bram Stoker in the speech for this very funny story about a priest messing up the sex of a baby. You know, it was he thought he was giving a talk about a male, but it's a female.
Oh my God, that's great! So, I'm going to hold you to that.
Absolutely.
Hey, how can people learn more about you? How can people learn more about what's going on? And I think this is if I'm not mistaken, DacreStoker.com. They can go right there and find out more.
Or follow me on Facebook, Dacre Stoker author, Facebook, Instagram. BramStokerEstate.com is the website my wife and I run. Give lots of information about not just Bram, but the whole family. You can also get my books there, and you can get them on Amazon as well.
Phenomenal. Dacre, stay on the line for a couple seconds.
Absolutely.
I want to thank you personally. You've exceeded all of my expectations once again. That's all I'm going to say. You've exceeded them. My 10 pages of notes, I think I got through 2. So
save them till next time.
Next time, I'm going to bring them up to Michigan and talk to you about it.
Absolutely. Cool.
Stay on the line. Thank you so much. Dacre Stoker is a true gentleman and a true scholar. I love him to death. He is so great. Anyone who is interested in that Victorian age of the whole idea of Dracula, you have to follow him. His books that are fiction based on Dracula are phenomenal. Do yourself a favor, buy them, sit down and read them. But I'm going to tell you how to do it. Turn everything down. Just have a small reading lamp, a cup of tea or sherry, a blanket over your legs, and just enjoy it. Allow the words to flow over you, not through your eyes, but through your very being. Seriously, they are just amazing, just amazing. Guys, thank you so much. You've been listening to Tim Shaw. My guest has been the great Dacre Stoker here on the Black Cat Lounge. We meet where else? We meet next at a dumpster transfer station. It's just the way it is. Guys, thank you so much for being here. We will see you next week. Ciao, babies. Bye-bye.